Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining for Heimdal Security Privilege Access Management session. My name is Alina Marie. I'm the Webinar Program Manager at Heimdal Security, and I will be your host for this event. Some of you might already know me from our previous sessions, but for those of you who are attending our webinars for the first time, please allow me to share a few things about myself. Over the past 15 years, I worked for companies such as HP, Oracle, and Optimize, where I had different roles in IT security, information technology, and compliance. I have a strong passion for technology and everything that's related to it, and always try to stay in touch with the latest and greatest. And among other things, I'm also passionate about photography, cars, and traveling. It's a real pleasure to have you all here. Thank you very much for attending. Here's the agenda for today. In the session, I'll focus on privilege access management and why it's important, the types of privilege accounts and what attack vectors can be used against your organizations, best practices around implementing your PAM program, and how we can help you automate this process in order to help you save money, save time, and of course, obtain a rock-solid cybersecurity posture. One last thing, if you have questions during the webinar, everyone is on mute right now, but feel free to use the question box in the GoToWebinar control panel. We'll have the Q&A session towards the end of the webinar where I'll try to answer your questions. Otherwise, if questions remain unanswered, I'll get back to you with an email with an answer for you. And towards the end of the webinar, I also have prepared a surprise for you. I think you're really going to enjoy it, so stay with us until the end. Now, let me give you a little bit of background about who we are. So for those of you that haven't heard about us, Heimdal Security is the leading European provider of cloud-based cybersecurity. The Heimdal name originates from the Northern mythology, where Heimdal is the guardian of the Bifrost, and the Bifrost is the only way in and out of Asgard, which is the realm of the Norse gods. And if you're familiar with the Thor movies from Marvel, you would have seen Heimdal as being the guardian in the gold-plated armor played by the actor Idris Elba. And our story as a company actually started back in 2011 at the DEF CON Capture the Flag Challenge. For those of you that are unfamiliar with the event, the DEF CON Capture the Flag is a competition that gathers teams from all over the world, and that includes teams from the likes of the NSA or the FBI, and of course many other security agencies and services. It's a very tough and professional competition. And then we had our own team that very early in the competition understood that instead of focusing on live interactions with the enemy team, they would be better prepared if they could focus their solution against their enemy. So they successfully managed to block every single entry point into their server by automatically patching, any vulnerable third-party applications, and of course by monitoring all the DNS traffic that was used by the enemy team to gain access into their server. And of course our guys won. It was actually for the first time in the history of the competition when a non-US team won that competition, and we managed to do that for 2 years in a row. And the intelligence that we gathered back then in 2011 and 2012 was merged into what initially was the Heimdal core product, that later on became Foresight. And when we took the product to market, we were actually able to completely map out the malicious infrastructure of the original CryptoLocker ransomware gang, and we handed that over to that intelligence over to the FBI, who used it to basically locate the malicious servers and take the entire cyber criminal gang into custody. And even today, we're working with the likes of the Europol, the US Department of Justice, the NC3, which is the Danish police cybercrime unit, and of course securing safer digital world, both for businesses and for consumers. And on a slightly different note, we are honored to have been chosen by the Royal Bank of Scotland as their recommended cybersecurity solution for all their business customers. So now that we got a little bit more acquainted, I'd say, let's talk about privileged access management. But first, let's talk about what is a privileged account. And we call a privileged account those accounts that have the most power or rights inside an IT department, and that are used by the IT team to set up the IT infrastructure, to install software or hardware, or to run critical service or conduct maintenance operations. To put it simply, privileged accounts can access an organization highly classified IT assets and, of course, the sensitive information stored within them. And before I dive into more details, please keep in mind that not all privileged accounts are the same within an organization. And the Institute of Forensic and ICT Security, they listed 7 different types of privileged accounts you should be aware of. And first, we have the local administrative accounts, which are non-personal accounts that only provide the local host with admin access. They are used for conducting maintenance operation on workstations, on servers, on databases. And due to the fact that they have like a shared password policy for having a much easier usage across an entire network, these are highly desirable targets for cyber criminals. Then we have privileged user accounts, and these are named credentials on one or more systems, and these are of course granted admin privileges and are usually one of the most popular type of accounts on a corporate network, basically enabling users to have admin privileges on their local desktops or on the network that they operate. And they often use complex password, and of course the power that they possess over the networks really requires a constant oversight of their usage. Domain administrative accounts, these provide control all over the organization workstation and servers. And although these accounts are usually smaller in number, but they have the largest and the most reliable network-wide connectivity. And a breach of these privileged accounts is always a huge risk for any organization, as they control domain controllers and have the right to change the membership of each admin account within the domain. Emergency accounts offer admin access for unprivileged users to protect systems during an emergency and are often referred to as fire call or break glass accounts. And for safety reasons, access to such accounts usually requires manager approval or consent. And what we've noticed is that this process usually involves an unreliable manual procedure that, because it's manual, it lacks auditability. Service accounts are privileged local or domain accounts and are used to communicate with the operating system through an application or a service. And in certain instances, some service accounts have admin privileges based on the application specifications under which they are used. And local service accounts have the ability to connect with Windows elements, thus password changes, coordination becomes quite challenging. Active Directory or domain service accounts, and for these accounts, basically password modification may be much more complicated as it involves coordination across several systems. And this problem also contributes to a widespread pattern of seldom changing service account passwords, which really poses a significant risk across an organization. And last, we have application accounts that are used to facilitate access to underlying company information through databases and apps, and they can be used to run, batch jobs or scripts. And passwords for these accounts are frequently embedded in and maintained in unencrypted text files, and that's a flaw that's repeated through several servers just to have better tolerance for application with faults. And this is a weakness that presents a significant security flaw to an enterprise, as the apps contain the data that usually the advanced persistent threat seeks. And these accounts that I just shared with you are necessary for maintaining your IT infrastructure. However, if their credentials ever end up in the wrong hands or are misused by malevolent insiders, the damage can be reversible, as I'm sure you're already aware. And having a strong privilege user monitoring is essential to hindering attackers and preventing them from causing major harm to your systems. In the book Privileged Attack Vector, Maury J. Harbour mentions 6 stages of insider attacks and these are similar to external threats. And external threats really no longer represent the primary threat to an organization. Infiltration can happen through various attack vectors, and of course, internal access is one of them. Through command and control, intruders can easily establish a connection to a remote server to access, toolkits and payloads and receive further commands. And this really helps them assess the environment and prepare their next steps of an attack. Through privilege escalation attempts, threat actors start learning about your network and identifying the privileged accounts and key assets, looking for ways to collect passwords, and of course, take advantage of the user rights they have already abused. And by using lateral movement between assets, accounts, resources, and identities, threat actors exploit stolen credentials to further compromise additional assets and accounts, basically continuing the propagation and the navigation through the target's environment. And of course, searching for additional opportunities and to remain undiscovered is the purpose of the threat actors. And this way, they can extend their reach from vulnerabilities to compromised identities, basically using multiple attack vectors, installing malware, and of course, identifying additional potential targets within the network. And for data exfiltration or destruction, the threat agents, they gather and they store and they exfiltrate the data, sometimes destroy it, and sometimes infect your systems with malware, which in most cases, unfortunately, is ransomware. And you must keep in mind that an entire series of attacks can be conducted by an internal or an external threat. And obviously, an insider's knowledge can really speed up all of these steps just because they can bypass security controls. And here are some interesting facts about the privileged attack vectors that you should be aware of. 90% of organizations feel vulnerable to insider threats, while 74% of organizations that have been breached in the past say it involves privileged credential abuse. And Forrester states that 80% of data breaches are connected to compromised privileged credentials, while the Ponemon Institute reports that 49% of organizations don't have any policies for assigning privileged user access. And the list could go on. Actually, Gartner has identified privileged access management as one of the top 10 security projects for any organizations. And with this, I hope I've managed to kind of paint a clear picture of the insider threat and the admin rights abuse landscape, and of course, their relationship to privileged access management. But what is privileged access management? And this privileged access management follows really the principle of last privilege, which is based on the idea that all users should only have access to the information and the systems that they need to perform their jobs. The theory of last privilege is really commonly recognized as standard practice in cybersecurity, and it's an important step moving towards having a better secured privilege access. And through following this least privilege concept, companies can minimize the danger of an insider threat and really protect themselves from expensive data breaches. And the privilege access management program refers to a holistic protection approach that involves individuals, it involves technologies, and it really aims to track, to manage, to protect, and to inspect all elevated sessions within an IT ecosystem. And every organization should rely on a PAM program to be better secured against risks that are posed by the misuse of privileges. And in addition, managing accounts with elevated rights are also turning into a matter of compliance, as authorities are enacting legislation that outlines the measures that companies need to follow to control their privileged accounts. And having a poor management of these accounts that not only pose security dangers, but it may also prompt regulating bodies to enforce penalties. And really just today, I read an article that Gartner recently conducted its annual Security and Risk Management Summit, and they projected that by 2023, 65% of the world will be covered by these regulations. And that's really a huge leap compared to the 10% of the world that's covered by data privacy regulations right now. And to avoid being caught with your guard down, like Marriott, Vodafone, JP Morgan, Sage, or Desjardins, these are companies that fail to properly manage the privileged accounts, and ultimately, and unfortunately, they became victims of cybercrime. You must implement a carefully planned and robust privileged access management program. And this way, you will successfully mitigate and prevent threats, and of course, secure your privileged accounts. In order to have an enhanced overall cybersecurity, to have increased protection against insider but also outsider threats, save huge amounts of time for sysadmins, and provide them with basically a complete overview and control over the entire network, so that's increased productivity, and of course full compliance. Here are the essential features that you should look for in a PAM solution. And a PAM solution should allow sysadmins to access control for privileged accounts. That means to provide the elevated privileges to users only for a limited time and for specific tasks or for specific software, and of course have full visibility on the actions that were conducted during the elevation period. A great PAM solution should also be able to monitor and record privileged access sessions, basically to provide a full audit trail for the sysadmins, so they would be able to see in the logs what users were doing with their limited period of privilege escalation. And a PAM solution should filter and control privileged operations, and this really enables users to indicate exactly what they want to do with the elevated rights when applying for a privileged access session. And administrators would then be able to, of course, approve or deny these requests. And also, the IT staff should have the ability to check whether the privileges that they were granted for that specific user were used as specified. And of course, remote employees should also have the option to use the same applications as they would if they would be in their workplace. And with privileged access being centralized both on-premise and in the cloud. And of course, a great PAM solution would provide your staff with special access without really requiring domain credentials. And last but not least, of course, a first-rate PAM security solution would provide you with complete visibility and alerts in real time, so that, of course, sysadmins can address any potential threats as quickly as possible. So how can we help? Of course, with Thor AdminPrivilege, we can do all of that and beyond. It's the only tool on the market that really de-escalates user rights upon threat detection when it's used in tandem with the enterprise versions of Thor Foresight, Thor Vigilance, or Thor Premium, and really raises the bar in privileged access management. It's a modular PAM software that really helps your organization increase its cybersecurity, of course, ensuring full compliance, and as I mentioned a little bit earlier, greater productivity. And it's not only allowing you to efficiently manage user rights, but it also lets the users install software themselves while keeping your organization completely safe, and of course provides you with logs and audit trails for data protection and compliance. And basically, to demonstrate all of that, I'm going to quickly jump out of the PowerPoint presentation and head to our unified threat dashboard. I hope you guys can see it. It's a cloud-based solution, so it will be accessible from any browser. I'm just going to click on submit here. I've put in my credentials. Of course, we enforce a two-factor authentication as well, so I'm going to put in the code now. And then I'll be taken into the unified threat dashboard, where you'll see all the modules that you're going to have access to. And navigation, as you'll notice, is pretty intuitive. It's pretty simple and easy to use. On the left-hand side, we have access to all the modules and the features for the modules. And of course, then we have the analytics for each of the modules that we have available. And I'll briefly go through each of those. So we have the dark layer guard and vector detection, which are our unique threat and prevention solution, where with our agent installed, you can get filtering of the incoming and outgoing traffic to and from the machine, whether that's perimeter-based with Forseti or endpoint-based with Thor Foresight. A little bit down below, we have exploit resilience, and we had a webinar a couple of weeks ago about the solution, and I've explained that at the time that, you know, with Foresight exploit resilience, we can basically automatically patch any third-party application or install Microsoft updates. And of course, also you with Thor Foresight Infinity Management, you would be able to deploy your own custom application and custom patches for those application anywhere in the world using our Cloud Delivery network that uses encrypted files and encrypted traffic. And you know, you can really push this anywhere in the world, as I said. Thor Vigilance is our next-gen antivirus, and AdminPrivilege is what I'm going to talk about today, and I'll get back to this in a couple of minutes. Email security and spam filter and email fraud prevention are our email protection suite. And of course, you can also visualize the entire active clients in your client base, as well as you have the agent installed on those machines as well. But and of course, here at the top, all of these reports, by the way, are within the selected time frame, which is by default 30 days. But you can go back as much as you need to, as long as you, of course, have that data available or have that module installed if you're looking for the information. And with all of our products, it really all starts from the settings. So when I'm clicking on the settings button at the top, and it starts with the really the group policy, and here are all the group policies that we use right now internally. You can have group policies for Windows, for Mac OS, and for Android. I'm going to use Heimdal support for this particular example. But just to say, making sure that I'm coming clear, you know, here you can create a new policy, you can maintain any of the already created policies, you know, you can enable them or disable them, you can even duplicate any of the existing policies. If you don't want to start from scratch creating one, maybe you need to make just small tweaks to the one that's already existed. And if you click on any of those, it's going to take you to the settings for that particular policy. So of course you have the policy name, you have the language, you have the AD computer group and AD user group, and these are really used for whenever the machine would come online, this particular group policy, the policy would be reinforced, or whenever a user is going to come online under this group policy, the policy is going to be enforced. And then we have policy check interval and licensing check interval. These are dynamic. You can really change them however you want to. And basically this enables the frequency at which the policy is being reinforced on the machine. So this way, even though a machine may have been online, if you've made changes to the policy, you know, whenever it's going to come online, it's going to make sure that it's listening to the rules of this group policy. So this is for the, and there of course are a couple of other additional settings at the group policy level that I'm not going to really touch upon today. But for any of the modules, you can go into the settings just by clicking on their respective tabs here. And as I mentioned, today I'm going to focus on Thor AdminPrivilege. And of course, in order for AdminPrivilege to work, we first need to enable it. So this is what the first option does here. And right after that, the first option that we see is to de-elevate and block elevation for users with that have a risk of infection. And this will basically activate the feature where we take information from Thor Foresight or Thor Vigilance, and if there's any indication of an attack or compromise, we will automatically de-elevate the admin rights and keep the users safe. Then in the run as administrator section, you would basically allow run as administrator. What this means is that a user would be able to right click on an application and run that application as administrator with admin rights. Of course, you can require a reason for that, and you can set it to run in auto mode or in an approval via the dashboard, and we'll see how that looks like in a couple of minutes. We normally recommend for this part when for the file admin session, let's say, that you run it in auto mode. This way, it would allow the users to remain flexible, basically, and keep the computer safety at an optimal level. Down below, we have the administrator session. And what this really does, if we're going to check that box, it will allow the user to elevate the entire computer to local admin rights. And of course, for this as well, you can require a reason, and you can run it in auto mode or approval via dashboard. And for this option, we would normally recommend that you keep it in approval via dashboard, because it poses a much greater risk having the entire machine elevated to local admin rights. And the next option we have here is to automatically close all processes that were started during an elevation when the elevated session ends. And for this to work, you're going to have to set up a session length that's can be between 2 minutes and 120 minutes. And what this would do basically is that it will close all the processes that started during the elevated session. So if for some reason there are some processes in the background that run you were not aware of as a user, potential malware or viruses, whenever the session is going to end, all processes that were run during the elevated session are going to be killed instantly. And for the group settings, here's where you'll be able to only allow a specific user to request admin rights. And for this to work, their username must be part of the host name of the computer. That would be separated by a hyphen. And what that means is that only the owner of that computer will have these rights, and any guest users on that machine will not have the elevated rights as well. And in additional settings, you can use this option to revoke existing local admin rights. What this would do is that if there are users under this group policy that have elevated privilege, what will happen is that whenever this option is going to be enabled and we update the policy, whenever this policy is going to be applied on the computers that fall under this group policy, the elevated rights are going to be taken away. But what you can do is to still preserve some users with local admin rights, and we can do that at hostname level. So we can select from the hostname that are under this group policy, or put in just a username and then add them to a whitelist, if you will, that would still retain the local admin rights for this particular usernames or host names. And that's in a nutshell the settings part for the Thor admin privilege. Now, if I go back home, I can go and explore the dashboard part, the features part for Thor admin privilege, either by clicking in the navigation pane or by going here and clicking on more details. And this analytics part really provides me, with some brief information during the period of time that I've selected at the top, how many sessions I have elevated. So that's entire machine sessions that were elevated, or how many files were elevated. And the history is, of course, a combination between the two. Clicking on more details, it's going to take me to first seeing the pending approval. So this is what admins are going to be able to see whenever they're going to log into their dashboards. And here they're going to see their own, the requests that have been routed in the dashboard. And I'm going to quickly exit full screen here just to show you how a user would request this. So they'll have their Thor agent. They'll click right on the Thor agent, and then they'll request admin rights. And if you've enabled them to require a reason, there's going to be a little pop-up window saying to input that reason for the file elevation. Once that's done, the request is going to be routed in the dashboard, and then the sysadmin can select one or multiple requests for approval and whether approve or deny that particular request. And once they've done that, then a little pop-up window is going to show in the corner of the screen, so just like this one, that the access was granted and the elevation was accepted. What that means is that it won't start right away. Maybe as a user, I'm now requesting for an elevated session, but then I'm going in my lunch break, or I'm leaving office, I may need it tomorrow, or maybe I'm coming later, whatever that reason is going to be, I'm away from my machine. So the user is going to receive the rights to have an elevated session, but he will decide when he will be able, or she, of course, will be able to start that session. So if I click start now, it's going to provide me with an elevated session on my machine. That's going to be available for the duration of time that I've set up in the settings like we've seen before. So pretty neat. Then, of course, all of these, the pending approval, the history, the most escalated application, escalated hostname, can all be downloaded in a CSV if ever needed. And of course, you can then manipulate that data in Excel and create your own reporting with it if that's what you feel like doing or required by your organization. In the history, I think this is pretty self-explanatory. You would be seeing a history of all the requests that have been routed in the dashboard for either file elevation or a session elevation, as we say it. And you can see the host name, what was the username, for how many minutes, when it started, what was the reason that was given. Of course, what is the action after the elevation session if the machine was de-elevated, and that full audit trail of the programs that were executing during the elevated session. If I click on here, I'll be able to see the process name, the full path of the file that started the process, what's the username, and when that started. And you can, of course, filter by processes that were started by the user or that were started by the system. And the most escalated application is basically going to tell you which of the applications were the most escalated by right-clicking on them and require admin rights to run it. And the most escalating host name is, of course, the host name that sent the most escalating requests to your admin dashboard. So as you've seen, this is really the most comprehensive and simple to use privileged access management solution on the market, and really has all the features that you need from a stellar PAM solution. Now, I'll get back to the PowerPoint presentation for the Q&A session. So let me see. What are the questions that I got here? All right, so one question, it's saying, is it correctly understood that your solutions work independently from the Active Directory locally? And what if the endpoint is offline? Okay, good. That's a good question. So really, AdminPrivilege works independently from the Active Directory and is controlled by the Thor agent. There's only one agent that you need to install for all of the modules to work, basically. So as you've seen, the user will be able to see the agent on their taskbar or not. That's something that you can decide, but that's how we can control everything. And of course, the controls are also managed in the unified threat dashboard. And if a user is really set in running in auto approval mode, then that functionality is still going to be available offline, even the user is not connected to the internet. Let me see. What does this solution offer that competitors don't? So first of all, it's the only solution on the market that does the elevation of rights and actually blocking escalation of rights within threat detection, as I've mentioned a little bit earlier. And then someone's asking is there any option to elevate a particular application update rather than allowing a session to install any application during the approved time. So with admin privilege, what you can do is allow the users to run a specific application, and you can enable them to require a reason for running that particular application. Of course, as you've seen, the sysadmins would be able to actually look and see what processes were run, how was that elevated time spent, what were the processes that were run during the elevated session. And for basically running application updates, we have the automated patch management, exploit resilience, and that would control all the software updates and update third-party application or Windows updates through that module. Another question says, in my company, we have some issues with people complaining and making a fuss every time we add new restrictions. And from a security point of view, what is your advice to basically have a least impact on employees? It's something that we hear a lot, and really, there's no way going around the restrictions. They must be implemented to make sure that you maintain a secure environment in today's threatscape. And the challenge we see in most companies is really the lack of communication. They're not preparing their employees properly, explaining why the restrictions are going to be applied. They're not explaining that if something were to happen with the organization, if there will be a loss in revenue, maybe because of a ransomware or other scenarios. Obviously, there's going to be less money for salaries, and this could potentially lead to firings. So it's really up to the organization to make sure that they secure the employee buy-in before they're going to implement the restrictions. So make sure that you have and allow a proper pre-restriction communication, let's say, that goes out to the employees where the restrictions are being explained, and of course the reasons for those particular restrictions. And with that, I'll move to the giveaway section. And for all the participants in today's webinar, we will have a 90-day enterprise extended free trial, and of course a free assessment of your organization's cybersecurity posture. And for this, you're going to have one of our cybersecurity consultants get in touch with you to help you set this up. But also, all participants are going to get 1 year for 3 devices for Thor Foresight home license. And for this, you will receive an email from us with your license key in the next couple of days. And I thank you very much for the questions. I thank you for the time that you spent with me today. And hopefully I managed to provide you with useful patch management best practices and privilege access management best practices and information, and basically help you shed some light on the importance of having a robust privilege access management program. At the end of the webinar, we're going to have a short survey, so if you dedicate 1 minute to that, it would mean a lot to us. We would be able to, of course, put better content in front of you. And until next time, I wish you all good health and stay safe, both offline and online. Thank you very much again. Bye-bye.